Captain Rhys and his crew sail to the treacherous Storm Reef, lured by a map leading to a legendary fortune. But it's no ordinary treasure, guarded by the vengeful spirit of a pirate known as the Tempest. This gold comes with a curse. As ghostly forces rise from the depths and claim their due, only Rhys's defiant first mate, Calista, realizes the price they're paying. Will they escape the curse, or will greed doom them all to the reef's haunted depths? And what price is worth paying for a fortune so fiercely guarded? Thunder cracked across the midnight sky, fierce as a hammer splitting the heavens. Captain Rhys cut a dark silhouette at the prow of the iron sable, his eyes fixed on the ominous horizon. Tonight, they would enter the Storm Reef, a place no sane sailor dared tread. The crew whispered of curses and ghostly specters, of the Tempest captain's wrath guarding treasure hidden deep within those jagged waters. But Rhys was no ordinary pirate. He didn't just seek gold, he sought the legend behind it. And tonight, he would have it. The wind whipped his coat, its tattered edges snapping like the jaws of some wild beast. Behind him, his first mate, Calista, watched him with wary eyes. Known for her skill with a blade and her keen instincts, Calista had seen her share of storms and perilous waters. But the Storm Reef? This was madness. She approached him, voice low. "Captain, the crew's on edge. They say the treasure's cursed, that those who touch it are never seen again." Rhys laughed, dark and sharp. "Let them be afraid. Fear keeps men alive, and tonight they'll need it." He turned back to the churning waves, his gaze steady and unyielding. "If there's one thing I know about curses, it's that they're just stories. And stories can be silenced with enough gold." The night was thick with fog, each swirl revealing and hiding shadows that moved like whispers in the dark. A faint glint appeared on the horizon, the glimmer of something ancient beckoning them forward. The map Rhys held, captured from a dying British officer on a raid, had led them through months of battles, betrayals, and near starvation. Yet here they were, at the edge of the Storm Reef, on the cusp of the legendary treasure of the Tempest, the infamous pirate who had buried his fortune amidst these cursed waves. A flash of lightning revealed a grim sight. The reef's towering, sharp rocks jutting out of the water like the teeth of some monstrous sea creature, waiting to devour their ship whole. But Rhys knew his course. Turning to the crew, he shouted, "All hands on deck! We sail into the jaws of the reef, so grip tight and follow orders. There's no turning back now." The crew moved like shadows, their faces grim, voices hushed as they braced for the treacherous passage. Callista's gaze shifted uneasily to the dark waters below. Legends spoke of ghostly ships prowling these waters, and she could swear she'd seen flickers of movement out there, silent shapes, watching and waiting. The ship groaned as it inched forward, carving a careful path between the craggy rocks. The crew held their breath, each wave seeming to rise higher, the silence broken only by the distant clap of thunder. Rhys moved between them, his presence steadying, even as he barked commands. Yet in his hand, the map began to glow faintly, a shimmering, almost sinister light. "Captain," Calista murmured, nodding toward the map. "That light, it isn't natural." Rhys only grinned, his voice laced with a reckless thrill. "We're close, the Tempest's treasure calls to us." The calm shattered. A massive wave rose from the darkness, slamming down onto the deck with a roar. The crew staggered, shouting, grasping onto ropes and rails to keep from being washed overboard. The water churned violently, and through the mist, they caught sight of a shape, a massive, shadowed figure looming in the distance, its outline ragged, decayed, and unmistakable. A ship, but no ship they'd ever seen. "Ghost ship!" someone yelled, eyes wide with terror. "No!" Rhys bellowed over the din. "There are no ghosts, only weak minds. Man your stations!" But as the spectral ship drew closer, the air grew colder, the chill sinking into their bones. It bore no sails, only tattered remnants that flapped in the windless air. Its decks seemed to bleed shadows, shapes moving across them as if alive. Rhys watched, transfixed as the ghostly vessel passed, its crew of silent, staring phantoms glaring with hollow eyes. Callista's grip tightened on her sword. "Captain, if this is what guards the treasure, perhaps we're wiser to turn back." Rhys's grin faded, his eyes darkening as he met her gaze. "We've come too far to turn back now, Calista. That ship may be our final warning. But I'm not a man who heeds warnings." The crew fell silent, but Calista could see it in their eyes. The shifting mix of greed and terror, the unmistakable lure of the unknown. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it, drawn to the cursed promise of riches they could hardly imagine. And just as the ghostly ship faded into the mist, the map in Rhys's hand pulsed once more, its light now blinding, like a beacon pulling them to their doom. The fog thickened around the iron sable, turning the night into an endless shroud. Every creak of the ship, every snap of rope against wood sounded sharper in the silence. The crew, hardened pirates who'd fought through blood and cannon fire, now shifted uneasily, casting wary glances at the inky black waters beneath them. Calista felt the chill seep into her bones as she clutched the railing, her gaze never leaving the glowing map that pulsed like a heartbeat in Rhys's hand. "Captain," she murmured as she approached him, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's something alive in these waters. I can feel it." Rhys's face hardened, but a flicker of doubt crossed his eyes before he quickly buried it. He held up the map, its eerie glow illuminating his scarred, weather-beaten face. "Whatever we feel doesn't matter, Calista. All that matters is that we're close and we're going to claim this treasure or be damned trying." With a nod, he signaled to the helmsman to steer closer to the center of the reef, where the rocks jutted higher, forming a labyrinth of jagged stone and hidden currents. The map's light grew brighter, casting strange shadows across the deck. Each crew member felt its pull, an invisible hand reaching into their minds, sparking visions of gold piled high and jewels that shimmered with an otherworldly glow. But beneath the greed, something darker stirred, a sense of being watched, as if the shadows had eyes. The first mate's gaze drifted over to a young sailor named Jory, his hand trembling as he gripped his sword, eyes wide with fear. He'd only recently joined the crew, lured by tales of wealth, but now he looked as if he'd trade every coin for safe passage home. "Hold steady, Jory," Calista said quietly, placing a firm hand on his shoulder. "Courage keeps you alive as much as a good blade." Jory swallowed, nodding, but his eyes remained fixed on the shadows stretching across the ship, as if they might come alive at any moment. And then, without warning, a sound echoed through the fog, a low, mournful groan, like the wail of 100 souls trapped beneath the waves. Every head snapped toward the sound, and an uneasy silence fell over the crew. The sound grew louder, closer, and then, out of the mist, a hulking shape emerged. A ship, rotting and barnacle-encrusted, its timbers blackened by time and tide, floated toward them, moving with the eerie grace of something alive yet dead. The crew murmured in terror, and even Rhys's face grew pale as he watched the ship approach. A tattered flag whipped in the windless air, a skull etched with the mark of the Tempest. The ghostly ship loomed closer, its empty decks seemingly watching them. "Brace yourselves, men," Rhys shouted, his voice cutting through the fog. "If they come for us, we'll send them back to the depths." But no assault came. The spectral ship halted, drifting beside the iron sable, its silent, empty stare heavy with menace. And then, as if compelled, the map flared brighter. Rhys's hand shook as he held it up, and a line began to burn across its surface, forming a path through the reef's jagged teeth. "Follow it," Rhys commanded, his voice fierce, desperate. "That path leads to the treasure." The helmsman obeyed, steering the ship into the path carved by the map's light. The rocks loomed close on either side, scraping the hull as they passed. The ghostly ship drifted behind them, matching their course with silent menace, its shadow filling the crew with a dread that clung tighter than any chain. As they navigated the treacherous path, whispers filled the air, faint voices of sailors lost to the reef over the centuries. Each crew member heard them, the faint cries of men who'd once dreamed of riches, only to be swallowed by the curse. Calista pressed her hand to her ears, trying to shut them out, but they slipped into her mind like tendrils of mist, carrying fragments of broken promises and desperate regrets. And then the voices grew louder, taking shape into words that sent a chill through her veins. "Turn back, leave the gold, or be claimed by the Tempest." She turned to Rhys, her voice urgent. "Captain, this is a warning. If we go further... But Rhys cut her off, his voice tight with obsession. Enough, Calista. We're closer than we've ever been. Don't you see? That ship isn't here to stop us. It's here to lead us. Callista's jaw tightened, but she said nothing, her eyes burning with a fierce determination. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, but none dared to challenge Rhys's command. The promise of gold was too strong, a chain binding them as surely as any curse. The ship pressed onward, the ghostly guide slipping back into the fog. But its presence lingered, watching from the shadows. And then, suddenly, the waters grew still. The fog dissipated, and they found themselves before a sight that stole the breath from their lungs. A massive stone structure jutted out from the reef, a forgotten ruin carved with symbols of storms and oceans, an altar of sorts, rising from the dark waters. And at its heart, gleaming like fire against the night, lay the treasure. Gold, jewels, artifacts from a dozen lands, all piled high, untouched by time. The crew gasped, their eyes wide with wonder and greed. Rhys stepped forward, his gaze hungry as he reached out, fingers brushing a golden amulet shaped like a whirlpool, an insignia of the Tempest. But the moment his fingers closed around it, the air crackled, and a sudden violent wind surged through the ruins, sending waves crashing against the ship. The ghostly whispers returned, louder and angrier, swirling around them like a storm's fury. Rhys staggered back, clutching the amulet, but his face was a mixture of triumph and terror. He had the treasure, but now the curse had taken hold. The ground trembled, cracks forming in the stone altar, and the once silent shadows began to move, taking shape into spectral figures that rose from the depths. The crew cried out, scrambling back as the phantoms advanced, their hollow eyes fixed on Rhys, the amulet in his hand like a beacon. But Rhys only laughed, defiant in the face of the curse. "I've taken what's mine. No ghost or curse will stop me." But as he spoke, the ghostly figures lunged, their cold, spectral hands reaching out, and the crew realized with dawning horror that the curse was not a warning, it was a promise. The Tempest had returned, and he would claim his due. The sea churned beneath the iron sable, its black depths roiling as if possessed by a hidden rage. The phantoms swirled around them, their hollow eyes and twisted forms advancing with the slow, dreadful inevitability of a storm. Captain Rhys, still clutching the gleaming amulet of the Tempest, stood defiant, his eyes wild with a hunger that ignored every warning the shadows whispered. His voice rang out fierce and unyielding. "Come at me. I have your treasure, and I'll keep it till my dying breath." The specters halted, their faces twisted in anguish, but they did not retreat. Instead, the air grew colder, an unnatural frost spreading across the deck, biting into the flesh of the crew. Calista felt her blood chill as she met the gaze of one of the phantoms, a man with empty eyes and a face frozen in terror. His mouth opened in a silent scream, and Callista's heart pounded as his voice filled her mind, echoing with despair. "Give it back, or join us in the endless depths." Rhys laughed, dismissing the fear that had overtaken his crew. "They're nothing but shades, memories left to rot on this cursed reef. Stand fast, men. There's no curse here, only gold and riches beyond your wildest dreams." But even as he spoke, the mist thickened, swirling into a vortex that encircled the iron sable, trapping them within a spiral of darkness. The ship creaked, its timbers groaning as if sharing the dread that clutched at the hearts of every man aboard. Jory, his young face pale, took a trembling step back. "Captain, please. This isn't worth it. Can't you feel it? They won't let us leave with that treasure." The cold seeped deeper, numbing fingers and blurring vision. Calista, sensing the doom that closed in around them, gripped Rhys's arm. "Captain, listen to your crew. This treasure is cursed. We've taken what doesn't belong to us." Rhys tore his arm away, his eyes blazing. "Belong? It belongs to whoever's strong enough to claim it. And that, Calista, is us." His voice dropped, a twisted smile forming. "The Tempest can try to stop me, but I'll see him banished from these seas before I give up what I've taken." As if in answer, a towering wave rose from the depths, surging with a power that shook the ship. It crashed down upon the deck, sweeping men overboard, scattering treasure, and sending Rhys sprawling, the amulet still clutched tight in his grip. The ship reeled under the force, the crew scrambling to grip ropes and railings, fighting against the pull of the water that threatened to drag them into the deep. And then, through the mist, a figure emerged, tall and imposing, his form cloaked in shadow and spray. The Tempest himself appeared. His face was etched with the fury of 1,000 storms, and his eyes, dark and hollow, held the rage of a man betrayed by life and death alike. The Tempest stretched out a ghostly hand toward Rhys, his voice like thunder rolling over the waves. "Return what is mine, or face eternity in the abyss." The words sent a shiver through the crew, and Jory fell to his knees, pleading, "Captain, please. We'll all be dragged down. It's not worth it." But Rhys, reckless to the end, only laughed, holding the amulet high. "You've had your time, Tempest. Your treasure is mine now." He turned to his crew, his voice a desperate roar. "Back to work. This ship doesn't move on fear." Yet even as he commanded, the shadows of the crew of the Tempest's ship began to board the iron sable. Ghostly hands reached out, grasping at the living, pulling them back toward the abyss with an unbreakable grip. Calista felt her heart pound as she saw her crew members fall, their struggles useless against the strength of the spectral forces. The first mate's gaze shifted to Rhys, horror dawning as she realized that he would take them all down with him. A man blinded by greed. As the ghostly crew closed in, Calista took a bold step toward Rhys. "Give it back, Captain. You'll doom us all if you keep it." Rhys turned, eyes flashing with fury and fear. For a brief moment he seemed to waver, but his obsession held strong. "We're pirates, Calista. This is what we live for." "No," she hissed. "This is what we die for." Seizing her chance, Calista lunged, grabbing for the amulet. Rhys snarled, fighting her, his grip like iron. The two struggled, the amulet held between them, its dark glow flickering as if sensing the power play between the living and the dead. The ship rocked violently, the mist growing thicker, the voices of the damned rising in a cacophony of rage. Just then, a spectral hand reached through the fog, clutching Rhys's shoulder with an icy grip. The Tempest's hollow voice echoed across the deck. "Your greed has bound you to my curse, Captain." In that instant, Calista tore the amulet from Rhys's hand, breaking his grasp. She stumbled back, clutching it as the Tempest's apparition loomed over Rhys, whose face contorted with terror. "No!" Rhys screamed, his voice echoing through the night as the Tempest claimed him, his form fading into the shadows alongside the ghostly crew. The moment Rhys vanished, the mist began to dissipate, the freezing chill lifting as if the sea itself had taken a breath. The amulet glowed faintly in Callista's hand, its power muted, the curse seemingly abated. The remaining crew staggered, dazed and silent, as they took in the empty deck. Rhys was gone, taken by the curse he'd dared to defy. Calista stood at the helm, holding the amulet, her face grim and determined. With a final glance at the cursed gold gleaming on the altar, she took a deep breath and hurled the amulet into the sea. It splashed, sinking quickly, the waves closing over it as if swallowing the very memory of the Tempest's wrath. The crew, weary and shaken, slowly regained their senses. Jory's voice was barely a whisper, trembling with awe and relief. Are we free?" Calista nodded, though her eyes held the weight of the horrors they'd witnessed. "The curse lies with the gold now. Let it rest at the bottom of the sea where it belongs." But even as the mist cleared, a faint whisper drifted across the waves, a reminder that some treasures are never truly relinquished, and the Tempest's wrath would linger, waiting to rise again should another soul dare to claim what he had cursed. The first light of dawn broke across the water, casting a pale glow over the iron sable as it drifted away from the Storm Reef, bruised but miraculously intact. The remnants of the crew huddled in silence, their faces etched with exhaustion and haunted awe. No one dared speak of what they had seen, the horrors that had unfolded in those cursed waters. All that remained of Captain Rhys was a faded memory, a name they would only whisper in cautionary tales. Calista stood at the helm, her gaze fixed on the vast open sea ahead, her face unreadable as she steered them away from the ruins and shadows of the Tempest's domain. She had taken the weight of leadership into her hands, not by choice, but by fate. The surviving crew cast cautious glances her way, recognizing that she had saved them from a fate they could scarcely comprehend. For the first time, She felt the burden of command, the solemn responsibility of guiding these men to safety after losing so many. "Set course for open waters," she commanded, her voice steady, though a hint of sorrow edged her words. The crew obeyed without question. No one wished to look back at the reef, the jagged stones that now seemed to loom like tombstones, holding the secrets of the Tempest and his eternal curse. Jory, pale and shaken, approached her, his hands trembling as he gripped the railing. "Calista, what we saw. Do you think will it haunt us? Are we free of it?" She took a deep breath, searching for an answer that would settle the fears in his young eyes. "The sea takes what it will, Jory," she said, her voice calm. "But we left the Tempest's curse where it belongs. That reef will guard his treasure until the end of time, and anyone who dares disturb it again will face his wrath. Our place is on the open waters, free of it." Yet, as the words left her mouth, she knew a part of the Tempest's curse had left its mark on all of them. Some stains didn't wash off, no matter how far they sailed. She would carry the memory of Rhys's final scream, the icy grip of the Tempest's hand as it claimed him, forever, and the eerie echo of the ghostly crew's voices lingered in her mind, reminding her that greed had a price that no treasure could repay. Hours passed as the ship cut through calm seas, the horizon stretching wide before them. The crew slowly returned to their tasks, the specter of the reef fading in their minds as the sun climbed higher. But a certain gravity hung over them all, a quiet reverence for the depths they had escaped. The iron-bound box of Rhys's ambitions had nearly dragged them all down, and though they had survived, the cost was etched into each man's soul. As they sailed on, a soft breeze stirred, carrying with it the scent of salt and the promise of distant shores. The sea was as endless and indifferent as ever, its waves hiding treasures and curses alike. Calista turned her gaze forward, the weight of her new role settling across her shoulders, yet within her a resolve burned brighter than the memory of any treasure. Suddenly, Jory let out a quiet laugh, his voice breaking the silence. "You know, Calista, after all we've been through, I think I'd rather stick to plundering merchant ships from now on. Maybe we leave the cursed treasure hunts for fools and legends." A wry smile tugged at the corners of her mouth, and she nodded, her voice tinged with humor and relief. "I think you're right, Jory. Legends belong in the shadows, and we're not fools to chase them. There's enough gold in this world without crossing paths with spirits and curses." The crew murmured in agreement, a spark of hope and unity reigniting among them. They had faced death, stared into the darkness of the unknown, and emerged alive. Now, with the promise of simpler raids and fair winds, they felt a renewed thirst for life, for the thrill of the next adventure, one that wouldn't carry the weight of the supernatural. Yet, as the iron sable drifted into the open sea, a faint shadow lingered on the horizon, visible only to those who dared look back. The Tempest ship, a ghostly silhouette against the rising sun, watched them go, its hollow crew forever bound to the cursed reef, guarding its secrets, waiting for the next soul brave, or foolish, enough to seek its haunted treasures. With a final glance back, Calista felt a surge of relief and sorrow mingled as she turned her back on the horizon. The chapter closed. She had been forged in fire and storm, and though her heart carried scars, she knew now that her path was her own. She would lead her crew, not with reckless ambition, but with wisdom learned in the heart of the Tempest's curse. And thus, the iron sable sailed onward, leaving behind the cursed waters and its terrible secrets. The adventure had left a mark, but it had also forged a bond stronger than any gold. Their legend would be spoken of in whispers, a tale told in taverns from shore to shore, the story of the crew who defied the Tempest, who left his cursed gold to sink back into the depths. The sea as ever kept its secrets well. If you enjoyed this tale of haunted treasures and daring escapes, don't forget to subscribe to You Pirate for more thrilling stories on the high seas. Share this adventure with your crew, and if you're hungry for more, click on the next video to join another legendary quest. Let the sea carry you onward to new adventures.